Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. Craig Emmerich is the author of the book Keto, along with his wife Maria Emmerich, as well as the protein-sparing modified fast book. Craig graduated in electrical engineering and has always had a systems approach to his work. He followed his wife Maria into the nutrition field and has since dedicated his time to researching and looking at nutrition and biology from a systems perspective. Over the last 8 years, he has worked with hundreds of clients alongside Maria to help them heal their bodies and lose weight, leveraging their biology to make it easy. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thanks for having me on, Scott.
Very excited to have you here today, and would love, Craig, for folks who aren't familiar, if you could just start a little bit with your own personal story and background and what got you interested in ketogenic diets from the start.
Sure. My wife, Maria, has lots of cookbooks, lots of books out there that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. She started going down this path, though, probably about 17, 18 years ago. And it was from her own experience of, she was carrying extra weight. She had IBS and acid reflux and PCOS, and she was doing everything she was told to do. She even went to school for nutrition, and they were telling her the same old lines of eat healthy whole grains and low fat, and she was doing all of that, and on top of it was running marathons, and not she was still sick, she was still overweight, and it just wasn't working. So she knew there had to be a better way. So she just started researching everything she could get her hands on, and in the process writing some books, and they kind of took off from there, and she healed her in implementing the things she was learning on herself. She was migrating to a ketogenic approach, and in the process, she lost the extra weight. She reversed her PCOS and no longer has acid reflux or IBS issues, and just healed herself. And so then she started working with clients, and 16, 17 years of living this lifestyle now for her, and free of any of those issues. And so I saw that, it was a little longer for me to come along, like it is for a lot of guys, I think. But she led by example, which is the best way to go. And I just saw how good she felt and how much energy she had. And, I was a guy who brewed his own beer and, all this. So it took me a little longer to come around. But, 4 or 5 years later, probably 10, 11 years ago, I started coming on board. And I could just see how much better I felt. And, I lost weight and all of these things that just made me realize, this is a great way to live, not only for weight loss, but for health and just to feel good in your body.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and incredible what Maria has been able to overcome. And, I mentioned it at the beginning that you worked with hundreds of clients, but I'm sure the two of you together have impacted thousands of lives with your work, and you're very prolific, both of you, about the power of the ketogenic diet and helping making it more accessible for people and more streamlined for people. Keto
in general has gotten very popular in the last couple of years, but we were kind of looked at as the crazy people 10 years ago. And, we just knew what worked, and we saw our clients healing. It's tens of thousands of people that we've worked with directly in the last, 15, 16 years that she's been working with clients. And then if you look at the books, they're approaching 1 million books worldwide across all our books that we've sold. Wow. So definitely, the reach is amazing these days with the popularity. We're in Hawaii right now on vacation, and we'll walk down the beach, and a random person will just stop her and say, "You changed my life. I lost 120 pounds," and they just profess their, success that they had just from following our books. And that's a really rewarding thing. That's one of the reasons I went full into this as well, is it's really rewarding to have changed these people's lives and to show them how good their bodies can feel and reverse all these disease process, which is what when I wrote this book with Maria, I wanted to focus on. Let's look at the root causes of disease and try to reverse that so that the disease process reverses, not put Band-Aids on the problems like so much of healthcare does today.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that must feel phenomenal. But again, well deserved. And why do you
Thanks.
think it is? What do you think it is about your approach and Maria's approach that works so well for people? Or how would you describe your style and way of communicating the ketogenic diet, and maybe how it might be a little bit different from others?
Well, first of all, we never fell into the kind of bulletproof coffee fad of things. We always knew that, drinking essentially empty calories is not a good idea, whether it's a soda filled with sugar and no nutrients, or it's a bulletproof coffee filled with fat and no nutrients. Drinking your calories in general is not a great idea. You should chew your food. You should always stick with really good sourced, healthy, organic if you can afford it, quality whole foods. And that should be where you get your nutrients from, because they're very nutrient dense. And that's what helps the healing process beyond the weight loss. We work with so many clients, and the thing that comes up time and time again is that, the weight loss is great, but that's just a bonus to how good they feel and how much they reverse their poor health conditions.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a great lens to take. The nutrient density is absolutely key. And I want to get back to that, but you talk about healing, Craig. Would love to hear about, how the ketogenic diet has worked for you. What have you used it to overcome, and how has it helped you?
Myself, I was lucky not to have a lot of health issues. I didn't really test A1C or glucose levels, but I'm sure they were significantly higher back when I was before this lifestyle. But myself, I've lost from my high points, about 40 pounds. And that was just straight extra, body fat that I was carrying around from all the beer and carbs and, what I was eating. But myself as well in more recent years. So about 5 years ago, I started having some pain issues that didn't really make a lot of sense to me because, we've had clients that have lots of chronic pain, and the keto and even carnivore is extremely powerful in helping with chronic pain. And yet here I was pretty close to carnivore for many years, and I was still having these pain issues. Well, we came to find out about a year ago through the proper testing that I have Lyme disease. And so I have been actually eating closer to carnivore to manage those symptoms these days, because actually some of the first people that have done a strict carnivore were doing it to manage Lyme disease symptoms. I don't know if you've had them on your show, but it's been like 20 years that they've been managing Lyme disease through a carnivore diet. And so that's helped me a lot in recent years.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Craig. And I'm sorry to hear that. One of my best friends growing up had Lyme disease for a while, and suffered a lot of, especially mental, effects, unfortunately, because it was misdiagnosed like 4 times, for years.
We could talk about Lyme all day, but, one of the things that's really important about it is you hit on the standard Western blot Lyme test, that almost the doctors in the U.S. will run, up to 70% of the time has false negatives. So it says you don't have Lyme when you really do. And that becomes a problem, because if you catch Lyme early enough, it's actually not too bad to treat. The problem is when it comes chronic and you've had it for a year, 2 years, 5 years, it breaks down your immune system, and all of these things start getting into your body that your body would normally deal with, whether it's mold issues or heavy metals or, parasites, all this stuff that, because your immune system is so depressed, all this stuff comes in and messes your system up. I was lucky enough not to have the neurological situation. I don't know if being close to carnivore the entire time, for 5 years helped with that. I definitely think it helped me manage it for that long and not, I'm still able to function. I still, again, never had the mental clarity issues or anything. So I don't know if that was part of it, but I definitely think it's helped.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And so just take me back a little bit because this is so interesting to me. So when you found out you had Lyme, were you already aware of folks in the carnivore zero carb community who were managing Lyme disease? The only one I know of specifically is Charlene Anderson.
Yeah.
But were you like, okay, I have Lyme. I remember hearing someone talk about Lyme in the carnivore community, and because you were already wrapped up in this ketogenic world and entrenched in it, you were able to find that solution. Is that kind of how it worked, or correct me if that's wrong?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, yes, that's the person I was referencing to that I found later on. But we heard time and time again from Lyme people that keto significantly helps. And for a lot of them, if they did go all the way to carnivore, it helped even more. So with the symptoms. And myself, I've been keto for probably about 10 years, but, a lot of that was pretty close to carnivore. I mean, there's some gray areas of what is carnivore, as I'm just sure there's multiple flavors of that. But, I would mostly eat animal proteins, maybe have a little ketchup or something along with it, with a burger, which technically, is a plant. But, I was pretty close to carnivore for probably, 6-8 years. I'm kind of in and out of it on occasion. More recently with the Lyme, I'm definitely more into the carnivore angle most of the time. But yeah, there's the kind of that common thread of, keto definitely helped their symptoms and carnivore did even more. And that's not just Lyme disease where that can be the case. Like there's definitely a lot of neurological conditions like bipolar disease and some of these things where they feel better with carnivore or with keto, but going to carnivore really takes away most of the symptoms. Like Amber O'Hearn, I know she has managed her bipolar with going all the way to carnivore.
Yeah. And I just had Brett Lloyd on my show who overcame 20 years of major depression with carnivore, which was amazing to me.
That's great. Yeah.
And Craig, you talk about different versions of carnivore. I'm just curious, like, what did your diet kind of look like before moving more in that direction? What were the last food groups that you cut out? You mentioned ketchup. And then what does sort of your eating style look like on a day-to-day basis now?
So, I mean, again, there's kind of that gray area of what is carnivore. You can go all the way from nothing but animal proteins, not even like spices on them. That some people, because of their health status, need to take it that far to really manage things like bipolar.
Right.
There's other levels of it, where they'll maybe have some ketchup or, dairy is kind of, in or out based on your situations. So there's kind of a little gray area there. I would also call people who do like bulletproof coffees and things, while it may technically be carnivore, I would call that more zero carb than carnivore, just because, it's not a focus on animal proteins as much. So those are, kind of the gray areas in there. Myself, it was kind of going from what I would consider very low carb ketogenic, where, I might have some greens with my burger, so a little bit of some greens with dressing on it, to just a burger, so that's kind of the shift I made. I wasn't eating much outside of it to begin with. It was mainly just like ketchup and greens and some, maybe some sauces and things that were being added, that got eliminated to go more to a strict carnivore level.
Yeah, that's great. And I really I love the book Keto. I think it's really one of the best books out there in terms of all encompassing and really synthesizing and breaking down all these different aspects of a ketogenic diet in a sensical and logical and easy to understand way.
Yeah.
I really find it just such a great practical guide. And I love chapter 8, obviously, which is not titled carnivore or meat.
Yeah.
It's titled nutrients in a keto lifestyle, which I thought was
Yeah.
really interesting. Can you talk about that and the nutrient density of meat a little bit?
Sure. One thing I would like to point out as well with that is, we have for many years now, when we start clients out, and if their weight loss is their goal, we actually were prescribing pretty close to a carnivore lifestyle to begin with. We've always been the kind of stricter in the keto realm of we always count total carbs, not net. We find that people have much better results that way, but also you're eliminating some of the fibrous vegetables in that way. That if you only do 20 total carbs a day, you're kind of getting more of your nutrients from meat. And so really we kind of push clients more towards carnivore if weight loss is the goal, because number one, it works better. And number two, it gets them into keto faster. And carnivore in general is just a subset of keto, right? It's ketogenic without some of the added low carb veggies that some people will have on keto.
Yeah.
And so, that's always been our focus for a long time. And when I started about 3 years ago or so, when I started writing for this book, I started looking into some of these things about nutrients. I know, one of our root causes of disease is nutrient dense, vitamins and minerals, nutrient dense foods. We always have known that, processed foods in the grocery store are bad because they're devoid of nutrients and have lots of calories, right? They process out all the nutrients. And so nutrient dense foods is important. So I started looking into it, and it started to actually make me upset that I had done I knew all this about keto and all these things about our food and what goes into it. And even I didn't realize how nutrient dense animal proteins are. And it made me upset because it's just not talked about in the popular media, on TV or anything, that you get more nutrients, more vitamins and minerals from that steak than just about any fruit or vegetable out there. And nobody is talking about that. And so we dedicated a whole chapter to it in this book because we wanted to put light on that fact.
Yeah, it's crazy. Every time someone at work or some random acquaintance finds out that I eat carnivore or all meat, they say, "Oh, well, you should eat some fruits. You should eat some vegetables. Where are you going to get your vitamins, your minerals?" And I love in the book the tables you have and how you kind of break down the nutrient density of common quote unquote superfoods, like blueberries, avocados, etc., versus beef and versus organ meats, especially.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When we talk about carnivore, I'm not sure it's essential, but I think it's important for health. If you're doing strict carnivore and you want to do it for the long term, that you integrate some organ meats into that diet. Because if you look at those charts, beef by itself will, across a wide range of vitamins and minerals, beat out kale or blueberries, etc. But then if you throw into the mix organ meats like beef liver, it's not even close. I mean, that's the real superfood, is the organ meats. And so if you can implement those into that lifestyle, you have no concern about getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need. And we sneak it in, some people may be hesitant at first to do that, but we have a recipe for chili where instead of 2 pounds of hamburger, you do maybe 1.5 pounds of hamburger and 1/2 pound of ground liver, and you mix it up. And you can do that for just hamburgers or whatever you're using ground beef for, and you mix it in, and you don't even really notice it in there, especially if it's you got some spice to it.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really important. I've been trying to incorporate more organ meats myself lately. And it seems like, Craig, you're taking would it be fair to say, I think it's definitely fair to say that you and Maria came to this method and conclusion through your own research and work and experience with clients, but it seems similar to the methods of folks like Marty Kendall of optimizing nutrition, and even the Keto Gains group of focusing on nutrient density, protein, first in the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it originally came from our experience. We knew that focusing on quality ingredients that are very nutrient dense while being ketogenic, definitely, protein first kind of approach, focus on the focus of the plate's the protein, that worked really well. For, like I said, Maria, at least 15 years working with clients, time and time again, it reversed their issues. It helped them heal. And we just knew that was the right approach to go with. And it reflected in the results of our clients. So we've always stuck with that. We've never gone down the, fat bomb, fat fast kind of angle that seems, bulletproof coffees that are so popular today, but go away from that philosophy of nutrient dense foods first.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And Craig, where would you say you hear sort of the most common myths around meat when you're talking to clients, trying to get them on board and, trying to make meat the center of their plate and focus on animal protein? Where are they the most hesitant?
Well, the first one is, where am I going to get my vitamins and minerals? And so, that's why we have that whole chapter, and we share those charts constantly with people, that just to help them realize what's in their food. We just don't have a basic understanding of what's in our food these days and where the vitamins and minerals are. And that is a big component of it. Usually the next step kind of comes into the whole, red meat causes cancer myth that's out there, that things like the China study promote. There's definitely lots of information to debunk that, online. So we tend to just send people in those directions to research and learn. And knowledge is power, and that's what we try to do, is provide tools to understand things better about this lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm curious. Both me and my significant other are eating a carnivorous diet right now, and she would like to add more foods back in. And I'm curious, if you start a lot of your clients on a carnivorous lifestyle, how do you go about testing food sensitivities and sort of systematically adding foods back, if that's something they want to do?
Yeah, so we have a lot of clients with the same, they want to have a little more variety on the plate, and that's fine if they want to go that direction. Typically what we do, a lot of people bag on gluten and inflammation and issues there. Dairy is probably a more common allergen than gluten. And so, when people are going to start implementing a wider range of things, especially like dairy, we try to test for it. So we'll have somebody weigh themselves in the morning. Then after they've not had any dairy, 100% no dairy, no butter, nothing for, at least a couple weeks, because symptoms can show up, a week or more after you ingest it. So you got to really eliminate it for 2-3 weeks, maybe a month. Then you weigh yourself in the morning, then you have dairy that day, and you weigh yourself again the next morning. And if you gained weight, it wasn't body fat, it was most likely water weight. And that's a good indication that your body is not liking that ingredient, because it's retaining water, and you get it. That's a good sign of you still have a sensitivity to that item. So you can kind of do that with just about anything.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And if someone was to start adding back either, low sugar fruits or vegetables, which do you think would be, for most people, the least harm, the least risk, and the greatest nutrient density combination? I know it's kind of a weird question, but starting with a carnivore diet, if you wanted to augment it.
Yeah, I'd just start with some leafy greens. Spinach is packed with nutrients, fairly fairly well tolerated by most people, starting with the greens. You start getting to things like tomatoes and things that are nightshades, that can be more of an issue for more people. So you might want to take that a little slower, depending on if you are sensitive or not. But yeah, I would just start with the greens and kind of adding a salad to your protein that is the focus of the plate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And let's talk a little bit about calories. You address it all very well in the book, and you've also hinted at it with the Bulletproof Coffee. But how important are calories to weight loss, and how much should people focus on that?
It's very important. We like to say that we're not talking about in the traditional sense of, calories in, calories out, eat less, move more kind of mentality. But at the same time, calories definitely matter. And but also hormones matter. And that's why this lifestyle can be so powerful is, we put out that protein sparing modified fast cookbook, and in there's meal plans, and the meal plans have maybe 600 to 800 total calories for the day. And it's almost all animal protein. And we have people that reply to us, I can't eat all the food, I'm full. That's hormones. But at the same time, why are they losing weight? Because they're in a calorie deficit. But it's not a forced, they're not hungry all day long like you would be on, low fat approach. But low fat and lower protein kind of, high carb, basically vegetarian type approach. You're going to be hungry and you got to eat 3 meals plus 4 snacks a day because you're, always hungry. But this is managing the hormones while enabling a calorie deficit is what really becomes powerful with this lifestyle. Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense. I completely agree. I think folks who say, calories don't exist, calories don't matter at all, calories are worthless, are being somewhat naive and one-sided.
That can work for a while. What we see is somebody that's got a lot of weight to lose, they can kind of go down that approach of eating whatever they want until they're full and not worrying about it. And it might work for the first, 20, 30, 40 pounds, and then they'll stall. And it's because you have to take into account the calories that are being consumed.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about fasting? How does that play a role in, a normal, well-formulated ketogenic diet or in fat loss? How do you think about that and apply it with your clients?
Well, most people find that intermittent fasting, basically compressing your eating window from, down to maybe 8 or less or 6 or less hours a day. So you consume all your food within 6 hours of time for the day, and then there's kind of water only outside of that. Kind of comes natural after they're fully keto adapted, because after 4 to 6 weeks where your body's really getting better at burning fat as the primary fuel, so you're really keto adapted, you start losing your hunger, and you start that afternoon crash and being hangry in the afternoon at work, and those kind of things just go away, and you've always got this energy, and you never really have any cravings or hunger. And so it becomes easy just to cut one of the meals out and eat a little bit bigger meal maybe on the other for the 2 meals you do eat. So it not only comes natural, there's some metabolic effects of that as well. When you do intermittent fasting, after maybe 12, 13 hours of not digesting any food, your body starts to do other things like repairing the body and doing things that, our ancestors didn't have a constant supply of food. You didn't have a grocery store that you could go, or a refrigerator you could go to. And, they went, periods of time without eating, and their body is able to focus on repair efforts like autophagy. But I would say, diet is the most important component, whether you're intermittent fasting or not. So getting your macros right and getting your diet right is very important. You can get some added benefits of healing with intermittent fasting, but it's also not a panacea. Like, some people, they actually do the bulletproof coffee because they quote unquote extend their fast, which I don't necessarily agree with, but because of these beneficial effects of autophagy. Well, guess what stimulates autophagy even more than intermittent fasting? Strength training. So, if you really want to heal your body and improve your metabolism, do strength training and don't do bulletproof coffee to get some marginal additional autophagy benefits by not eating for a couple more hours.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think, fasting is great. I agree with your stance that most of the time it should come naturally and shouldn't feel forced. And also that, if fasting is an impediment to someone starting a ketogenic diet or eating healthy should always come first.
Exactly.
If your version of a ketogenic diet requires that you have a few snacks throughout the day or you eat 3 square meals a day, that's great. I think that's way more important than, forcing yourself into a state that if you're not eating correctly could be producing a lot of cortisol too.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, so we do the same thing. If you want to eat 3 meals a day, as long as your macros are within the range that we recommend, that's fine. The only thing we do say is, make sure you close the kitchen at least 3 hours before bedtime. Because if you eat too late in the evening, if weight loss is the goal, that interferes with human growth hormone production at night, which is what you really want to have happen. It peaks a couple hours after you sleep, but insulin's the antagonist to that. So if you ate right before bed, you got insulin that's high and it's going to inhibit HGH production, which can affect your weight loss results. So that's the only thing we say as a caveat to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally on board with that. And I love the chapter, or at least part of a chapter in the book where you talk about sleep. I have a pet obsession with sleep, and I've started moving my evening meal to 4 hours before bedtime and making it my smallest meal of the day. And it's made a huge difference in my sleep quality. According to the Oura Ring, I used to get almost no deep sleep, and now I'm, an hour and a half to 2 hours a night, which is really great.
That is, definitely. And that's also why we try to have clients move their workouts to the morning. Cortisol is naturally higher in the morning anyway, so why not do your workout then? If you do it too late in the evening and you're raising cortisol and before bed, that can also affect your sleep. And sleep is such an important component of weight loss that it's very much underappreciated these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's some amazing studies on even minor sleep deprivation and how it completely can hijack your results.
There was one done by the government. It was Army Rangers. They took these Army Rangers and they did nothing different except restrict their sleep to 4 hours a night, from 8 to 4 hours for 1 week. And in 1 week, their insulin resistance doubled.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
That's the only thing that changed. So yeah, sleep is important.
I've got one for you. I might mess up the specifics, but in this study, they took a group and they sleep restricted them by 1 hour for 5 days a week. And then they made it back up on the weekends, just 1 hour. So they went from, 8 hours a night to 7 hours a night during the week. Probably what even healthy people are doing, setting their alarm a little bit earlier during the week, getting a workout in before work. And the group that didn't do that just got consistent sleep throughout the week, it was something like they lost 80% fat and 20% muscle on a weight loss diet. The group that was restricted by 1 hour during the week and then made it up on the weekends lost 80% muscle and 20% fat.
Wow. That is crazy.
And I might be messing up the specifics, but it was something as dramatic as that. I think people were like accusing them of data fraud. It was so drastic.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, you see study after study, linking to circadian rhythms and all these things that, we get with clients all the time. And it's so these days with our lifestyles and work and kids, shuttling kids around, and it's underappreciated how little sleep a lot of people get. We'll have clients will say, so how much sleep are you getting? Are you getting good sleep? Yeah, I get pretty good sleep. I get maybe 5-6 hours. It's like, no, you can't sustain on that. You gotta, your body has to rest. And we'd say at least 8, maybe 9 hours of sleep is what you want.
Absolutely. And Craig, because you have talked about and brought up a protein sparing modified fast, can you talk a little bit about how you apply that? You mentioned it's very low in calories.
Yep.
I'm wondering, is it something that you apply cyclically with refeeds? Is it something that you say, try this a couple days a week or one day a week? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, what we do with clients is if they want to speed their results up or maybe break through a plateau or a stall, we have them at it a couple days a week. Start out with maybe 2 or 3 days a week. You add a protein sparing modified fast day, which is, little to no carbohydrates, maybe 100, 120 grams of protein, and then maybe only 30, 40 grams of fat. That forces the body to use more stored body fat for fuel, because the fat has been ramped down so much. But you're getting enough protein where you're not going to lose lean mass like you would with a standard water fast. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds, because also, protein has a thermic effect of food of about 25%, which is, if you ingest 100 calories of protein, you really only net about 75 grams because it's so energy intensive to use protein. So you get that benefit as well. So it's really, and protein's very satiating. So like I said, we've had people say they can't even consume the 700-800 calories that are in it because they're so full, which is just crazy when you think about it with that little of calories. But that's the power of it. And you can be satiated while ramping up your weight loss. And clients, after a while, if they've done this for a while, then the other days of the week, they do normal, what we call normal weight loss keto macros. So, make sure, hitting protein goals, but making sure staying under your fat and carb limits for the day. And then you could do it up to maybe 4 or 5 days a week, but, it's so low in calories that, you're not getting a lot of nutrients. Yeah. Even though you're eating very nutrient dense foods, you're only eating, 600 calories of them. So that's why we try to parse it out a little bit, just a few days a week.
Yeah, you really start to drag. I've done that before. And one thing, I love how you address it towards the front of the book is electrolytes and the importance of electrolytes. And I've heard the Keto Gains guys say that the number one mistake they see on keto, or maybe they say it's too much fat and too little protein, but they often say a very common mistake is not getting sufficient electrolytes, even people who've been doing ketogenic diet for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about electrolytes?
Sure. Yeah. That is, especially when starting out, your first 2 to maybe 4 weeks or so, you really got to focus on electrolytes. When you cut out carbohydrates retain water in your cells. So when you cut carbohydrates out, you lose a lot of water that's been retained, which is good because extra water weight kind of can be you're bloated and those kind of things. So you get rid of that extra water, but guess what goes with it? You get the electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium. And so you leach some of that out. And on top of that, if you do keto the right way, which is focusing on whole foods, nutrient dense foods, you're not getting the electrolytes you would from a standard American diet. There's so much sodium hidden in food, especially processed foods, that you don't even know you're getting. Like a McDonald's milkshake has more sodium than their French fries. So you're getting a lot of sodium that when you go to a whole foods approach that you don't get. So you got to be mindful about adding it, and managing those levels, because otherwise you get those heavy legs, low energy, headaches, these type of things of dehydration that you're going to get if you're not getting enough electrolytes.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Another thing I would just want to I just remembered too. We just got an inquiry from a person about doing keto when they were breastfeeding. And it was really interesting because, first of all, we've had tons of moms that have gone through pregnancy. Maria actually consults with one of the top fertility doctors in the country at CNY Fertility in New York.
That's awesome.
They put everybody there on a ketogenic diet to help with fertility. But so it's definitely not a problem. But she sent an quote unquote study or case study that was concerning her, and I looked at it, and it was this woman who was breastfeeding and started doing a ketogenic diet, and 10 days in went to the hospital because she was having headaches and jittery and like heart flutter and things. They called it ketoacidosis. It was dehydration. Her blood sugar was 70. Her blood ketones were like 7. That's not ketoacidosis. That's somebody who's definitely in ketosis, but if your blood sugar is 70 and your ketones are 7, that's not ketoacidosis. You need ketoacidosis is when you basically aren't producing any insulin, and your blood sugar goes way up and your ketones go way up to like 15 or 20 ketones and high blood sugar levels, and your body comes acidic. But she was blood sugar of 70 and ketones of 7. It was misdiagnosis of severe dehydration, which, by the way, if you're breastfeeding, you have to be even more focused on hydration because that's one of the most common things that can happen because of the breastfeeding baby. So I was just shocked that this study was published and it was a complete misdiagnosis of dehydration.
Yeah, wow. That's really interesting. And just before you said that, I was thinking as well, Craig, can overhydration mess up your electrolyte levels? Do you ever have clients who drink too much water and then, are sort of flushing out some of the electrolytes?
Yeah, definitely. It's more of a focus on electrolytes than it is on consuming water. Now, there's definitely people who don't drink enough water. That if you have constipation, that's a pretty good sign that you're not getting enough salt and fluids, because the colon is really good at extracting moisture from stool. So if you don't have enough salt to retain water in your body, it'll retain it, and that causes constipation. But yeah, it's if you just don't focus on electrolytes and just add a bunch of water, when you urinate, you're going to be leaching out more electrolytes, and you could actually make it worse. So it definitely has to come in combination with electrolytes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you talk about this a bit in the book. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I've heard Dr. James DiNicolantonio talk about it on the Human Performance Outliers podcast, which is, how much I understand people on a ketogenic diet, particularly athletes, need to often supplement with all three of sodium, potassium, and magnesium.
Yep.
But a lot of people on a carnivore diet or a form of a carnivorous diet only add salt to their meat and don't supplement potassium or magnesium.
Yeah.
And the way I've heard Dr. DiNicolantonio talk about it is sodium is the most important, and if you're lacking sodium, your body will leach potassium and magnesium from your stores, and potentially calcium from your bones to make up for the sodium deficit. But if you have enough sodium, the other two aren't as big of a problem. Is that partially true, or do you think carnivores need to be supplementing more potassium and magnesium?
Yeah, that's in general typically true. First of all, if you look at our charts, animal proteins are very high in potassium. And so you're getting a lot of potassium from your food. And it is true, the body really likes to have sodium and potassium in a balance. And it's probably from an evolution standpoint that the body it's got a better pathway for leaching potassium than sodium, essentially. And so if you don't get enough sodium, it just leaches potassium until they're in balance. And so it's very important, like you said, to focus on sodium first so that you're not also leaching out that potassium that's coming in, which you get quite a bit on the carnivore lifestyle. So probably not a big concern with potassium for most people. If you have chronic conditions or a chronic deficit in potassium, maybe you might need to supplement for a little while to get the levels back up or something. But, in general, it's typically true that you need to focus on the sodium for the most part, because you're getting a lot of potassium in your food and because of that pathway where it leaches, if you don't get enough sodium. But also, I would point out that magnesium, is important for a lot of body functions, and like 70 or 80% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. And so I don't think it would hurt to add magnesium. I don't know if you never necessarily have to, but like I said, most people are deficient anyway, because we used to get a lot from our water supplies. And it's just not there anymore with city water and filtered water. Everything's reverse osmosis. You're taking all those minerals out of the water supply. And so that's part of the reason that most Americans are deficient in magnesium.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I personally supplement with magnesium, partly because of that and partly just in case it might help with sleep a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing that you can try if you're struggling with sleep, and adding some magnesium, quality magnesium in the evening can definitely help with that. Can help with restless leg if you're getting some of that going on. It also can be helpful with migraines. Magnesium is relaxing, so it helps the blood vessels relax. And so magnesium is a good one for a lot of people.
Yeah. And Craig, any other supplements you think are important on a carnivore diet?
As far as just general population, or just, diets in general.
Yeah.
There's not really anything you need to do. Really you can just, as long as you're getting adequate sodium levels, most people will be fine. If you're into kind of the realm of having a chronic condition, there may be things that can help speed up the healing process. We definitely do that a lot with clients as well, is that, if you have a condition, whether it's, IBS or acid reflux, there may be things that can help heal your intestinal lining, like aloe vera and L-glutamine and things that can help heal as you're changing your diet. But in general, I think there's nothing that has to be done, but there's certain things that can be done that can maybe give you a little extra benefit. Like, for example, K2. Vitamin K2 is the vitamin that regulates calcium metabolism. So it gets calcium where it needs to be, like in the bones, and keeps it out of, kidney stones or arterial plaque on your teeth, etc. So a lot of people see a lot of benefit from taking that. It normally comes from organ meats, which a lot of people don't eat as much of these days as we used to as ancestors, as well as naturally fermented vegetables. So, that one I think can definitely help. And depending on your climate and your environment, vitamin D could be a good addition, maybe even just in the winter if you're in a climate where you're not getting enough sunlight. So that, there's little things like that. But as far as the diet itself, as we show in that chapter 8, you're not getting a deficiency in any real nutrients, especially if you're adding organ meats with the vitamin C in like beef liver and stuff.
Yeah, completely agreed. I think supplements are less necessary.
One quick note on that, because that's one that people will point out right away as vitamin C, not being in meats. First of all, there is some in meats. And second of all, the vitamin C status is directly correlated to how much carbohydrates you take in. The more carbohydrates you eat, the more vitamin C you need. And so when you're doing carnivore and essentially a zero carb type of lifestyle, you need significantly less vitamin C.
Yeah, definitely. And you do a great job of explaining that in the book as well.
Oh, thanks.
And Craig, I know, you and Maria seem to have a great setup going on in, I believe it's Wisconsin you live in.
Yep.
And it sounds like you have access to a lot of local farmers and
Mm-hmm.
fresh meat and animals. But I can't imagine that you haven't noticed sort of the changing political climate around meat, especially lately with Eat Lancet guidelines and suggestions of a meat tax. Maybe not for yourselves, but maybe for yourselves and for your children. How do you feel about that, and what are your thoughts on that?
It's an extremely frustrating situation. The Eat Lancet, I just watched a documentary. It was basically funded by this woman who used to be a model, and her and her husband are extremely wealthy now, and they basically funded flying these Eat Lancet researchers around, and obviously very much influenced their output. And it's frustrating because we know that ancestrally that's not the way. I mean, there were no vegans by choice more than a few hundred years ago, right? You ate the food that was the land gave you, and most of the time that was from animals that you hunted. That's a fact. And if you put somebody into the wild today, they cannot sustain being vegan. We just wrote an article, vegan versus keto, just to dispel some of these myths in the media. It's very frustrating to me that, keto gets portrayed as this very restrictive, you're not going to get any nutrients and you can't sustain it because it's so restrictive. And in the same breath, they'll say vegetarian diets are awesome and they're super healthy. And they won't say anything about how restrictive they are. And all of these myths that are just projected. I was on a BBC podcast, and it was about end of the world scenarios. So like an apocalypse scenario. What would be the best diet? They spent 75% of the show talking to Dr. Greger, the vegan doctor. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, they're the first that would have to go off of their diet to survive. There's a show called Alone on PBS that they take people and they put them with some basic tools into the wild to survive on their own. They've had a couple of vegetarians on, and within 2 or 3 days, they are now eating meat because they have to survive. You can't go out and hunt. You can't gather enough vegetation to get enough calories to sustain yourself without eating meat. And yet they spent 3/4 of the show talking with a vegetarian guy. It just blew my mind. And wow. It's just so frustrating because that is the popular view. Same thing with like the environment, that, cow farts are going to ruin the environment. When you actually look at it with people like Peter Ballerstedt, the research he does and showing how you need more ruminants to reverse some of the climate change issues, not less. And it's completely impractical to try to feed the entire planet vegetarian. There's just not enough farmland available. So it's frustrating to have that kind of view in the media and being propelled across all the media channels that vegan's the healthy way and it's great for the environment, when the complete opposite is true.
Yeah, hopefully folks like Peter and yourself, and Sean Baker and a lot of folks out there are trying to, deliver a different message through the microphone will be able to sort of turn that trend. And I forget who said it, but someone made, I think it might have been Dr. Tim Noakes or Dr. Peter Bruckner made the point that, a school of fish, there's some rule in biology where in a school of fish, only a small % need to turn around to turn the entire school. And I'm hoping it is like that with veganism and meat and the health of meat, because if we need a majority to decide that meat is healthy, I think we're a far way away from that.
Never going to happen. But that's actually when I was at Low Carb Houston, Dr. Westman and I had some long conversations about some of the things that in that presentation. I decided to dedicate about 8 or 10 slides to success stories, because there's a pretty good medical healthcare contingent in the crowd. And I wanted to point out outcomes, because as a doctor, your first and primary concern is outcomes of your patients. That means, does my patient leave in better shape than when they came? You don't really care too much about how they get there, whether it's diet that helps them or whatever. But that's your goal, is to help improve their status of health and whatever the situation may be. And so because we've been doing this for so long, I started collecting these testimonies from clients, because we just kind of constantly get them at the beach or wherever we're at. I started, collecting them when they were sent to us. And I have a folder of thousands of testimonies now that point to all kinds of conditions being reversed and improved with this lifestyle. And Dr. Westman's actually going to help us publish some of those with one of his interns later this year, getting some of those case studies, because like a specific condition, we've got 6 or 8 or 10 testimonies showing a reversing of those conditions. You put that into a paper, and now that becomes 1 point. It's N equals 1. I understand that, but Dr. Westman thinks we should have more N equals 1 versus these, questionably funded studies that come out these days. Because that's what matters is, are people getting healthier doing this? And we got everything from alopecia to, this woman hadn't cut her hair in 20 years. And with this lifestyle, she came into the gym and whipped her hat off and she had a full head of hair. I mean, there's so many conditions that are autoimmune linked, that are linked to food, that can be reversed if you go to a low inflammation type of lifestyle like this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Craig, really appreciate you coming on the show, and I think listeners will get a lot out of this. Where can folks find out more about what you're doing, find your work, and I'll, of course, link to it all in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we've got a free blog with tons of information and recipes. It's mariamindbodyhealth.com. And then we have a site with lots of courses and support options and membership options at keto-adapted.com.
Great. I'll link those up, and folks can find it at carnivorecast.com. Thanks again for your time, Craig, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out, and share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.